This is the last session of the day, and they say last but not least because I think it's a great, great session. Basically on driving customer loyalty through highly engaged employees. Put it this way, the heart and soul of what is customer service, our people. So I'm going to hand you over to Dale Smith, and his description, or a description of him, is the man to transform frontline teams into living brand. How about that for a statement?
There you go. Who said that?
Yeah, I mean, the guy hasn't got an ego at all. He wrote it himself. Anyway, Dale, I'll hand it over to you, and let's look forward to a great panel session. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Is everybody sitting where they've been sitting for the last little while? No, you all right? I think, why don't we move some of these people up? We've got lots of space out there. Who wants to come closer to the front? You got your work cut out for you guys. You think, okay. Just seeing how engaged you were. Is everybody having a good day? Good day? Oh, it's going lower. Okay, I better stop. Okay, my name is Dale Smith. I'm with Bridge Training, and I'm going to guide the panelists through some questions, but really, more importantly, it's about listening to your questions and seeing if we can get some answers. So the three panelists are, we've got, I keep wanting to call you Miriam because that's what's in the thing, but we know it's Maria McCann. Maria McCann started her job, or her role many years ago, but some of the great jobs she's had is ASOS and Spotlight. What I've been trying to determine is some unique things about each of the speakers. So what I found out about Maria is she's a trained smellier. Sommelier. There we go. She failed, and I failed at getting it out right. A sommelier. Does everybody know what a sommelier is? It does sound far more interesting. Yes, and she failed at that, she said, because she kept drinking it. So also we've got Mike Sowden. Mike is a Geordie and a Newcastle United supporter, which I had to make sure I got that right. Yeah. However, in chatting to Mike earlier, he is married to a Scouser, and both his wife and his 9-year-old son are very excited by the recent win.
Liverpool fans, yeah.
Liverpool, 6-0. Are there any Liverpool fans in the house? Yeah, well, that was a bit of a quiet man. Very quiet, yeah.
Yesterday was a good morning to leave home.
Yeah. And he has a 17-month-old daughter named Jasmine, and he also plays the guitar and also coaches football team.
That's right, indeed.
I couldn't get past Gary's because I'm going to start right at the bottom. Now, we'll start at the top first. Gary's had some great jobs with American Express, where he started very early on in his career as a concierge on the international team. He's worked for AT&T, Novotel, EasyJet, and he really truly believes in putting the senior manager executive team and the board accessible to all customers and employees of the organization. And I'm going to kick off with you to explain that you're a pretty bad beekeeper, and you're upset about not getting the good honey this year or something.
Yeah, it's been, I've been beekeeping now for 4 years.
Wonderful.
Stung quite a lot of times, and they just don't seem to like me very much. So consequently, I spend the whole summer trying to get an ounce of honey and don't ever get any, but oh well.
And how does that teach you to deal with engagement?
Teaches you to be calm and respectful.
Yeah.
Because if you go to the hive agitated, wound up, then they'll sense it and they'll go crazy. So you have to be, which is quite hard for me to be sort of subordinated. I think, for most of us around here, I think probably the same sometimes. At work, you have to be the big chief. And then when you're with bees, it's completely reversed. Teaches you a lot about life.
Good. Well, if I can ask each of you to just give a little 5-minute profile of what you've been doing with your organizations. And then if we can begin to open it up for questions. Can I start with you, Maria?
Yes, you can. Is that working?
I think so.
Okay. I don't know if mine's going to take 5 minutes, but so I suppose the big challenge that I'm working through with the organisations and the brands that I work with at the moment is this sort of esoteric view that I have that a lot of businesses have very much a parent-child relationship with their employees. And my view is that tends to kind of then transfer to the relationship that the employees have with their customers. So we end up with a sort of parent-child and then parent-child. And so the work that I'm trying to do with some of the brands within Aurora and that I've been doing with previously with Spotify as well is to sort of reverse that trend so that we end up with a more adult-to-adult relationship between the business and its employees. Things like, I suppose, exercising decision-making muscles, not feeling like you want to take control when something goes wrong, not developing policies that are kind of developed around the minority of situations rather than, for the majority of people. So we tend to sort of develop simple things like travel expenses tend to be for, in the event that someone will defraud us, rather than actually trusting that the majority of our staff will do the right thing. And so that's sort of where my work is focused on, is sort of trying to bring that adult-to-adult relationship between the business and its employees, and then looking at the link of how that then impacts the employees that are talking to customers and the customer relationship.
Okay. And where do you think that begins? Right at the recruitment stage, or are you picking them up partway through?
It begins at the top, actually. It begins at the very core of how you want to engage and treat and talk to your employees. Netflix have got a great... Netflix are a big kind of US TV and movie streaming company, and they've got a great philosophy, which is called freedom with responsibility. So they're kind of sort of go back to their travel policies, about 5 words long, which is treat it like your own business or something. Mm-hmm. So for me, it starts from the top. It starts from the commitment that you believe that you believe and that you're clear about what you want your employees to have purpose in terms of their role, and then how you then go about letting them achieve that purpose. And how you recognise that purpose has been achieved through them, delivering results for themselves and for your business. So it starts at the top, and then it then starts definitely with recruiting the right attitudes and the right people. Yeah.
Okay, because I know we've had some great conversations earlier around creating a purpose model, so that engagement doesn't just begin about quick wins. It's actually about allowing people to connect to a bigger and broader community within the organization. Do you feel that you're achieving that now?
I think the work that I'm doing now is really at its embryonic stage. So I'm starting now at the sort of top of the organisation. But my hope is that yes, we will achieve that. I think at Spotify I was able to certainly achieve some traction with creating that purpose. So we had each employee was able, within the customer service centre, was able to have their own mission. Didn't have to relate directly to an ROI or an average handling time. It could be, I want to be promoted within 6 months, or I want to help 10,000 customers on this, or I want to develop my technical knowledge. And then what we would then do is put very tangible key results around that mission or that goal for that 3-month period. So I think in some way it has to link to the purpose of the organisation, but I believe that you can allow employees to have freedom of expression, to sort of create their own missions as well.
Great. Also, if I pass it on, kind of similar question to Mike, where do you believe that your success lies within employee engagement?
Hopefully the microphone's working. The history of First Direct, I guess, is part of my pitch up today, but I deliberately asked Dale if you wouldn't mind reading out the football result earlier, because I think there's something in sharing a bit about yourself which kind of reminds us all that we all have lives outside of conference halls and sort of work. And I guess one of the successes of First Direct is it really is all about people. It's about the people that we employ in the business and the way we bring them in terms of recruitment, the training that we put them through, and then critically the way they're sort of brought into the operation, and the way we sustain quality once those people are in the operation. And that's kind of fed everything over the last 23 years from a First Direct perspective. So I suppose that's been an ongoing focus. But it's not just about having people, it's about having the right people in the right sort of roles and the right seats. And I think that's a quote out of Good to Great, which is a book some of you might have read, where some of the big CEOs of Fortune 100 companies were asked, what is the most valuable asset of the business? And some of the people who were First Direct customer services reps 10, 20 years ago, they have now gone on to run the digital area, both in First Direct, HSBC, globally. So there's a huge piece in that for me around how you bring your people in. In terms of engaged people, there's all sorts of quirky stories I could stand up here and tell you. In fact, somebody was playing one back to me earlier about a CEO in First Direct on his 14th day in the business a few years ago. They had him racing down the corridor on a small yellow tractor in a race with a sort of colleague, and it was photographed and put around the business. And I guess it's an interesting story. You might think, well, what relevance has that got? But it just showed the people that he worked with that he was actually a real sort of person that could have a laugh, and therefore was approachable on an individual basis. So there's a lot about First Direct, which is actually history, as opposed to perhaps current initiatives, but we continue to obsess around the minutiae, around the way performance metrics and the way we grade things and assess things and score things, the way that rolls up. So we are very passionate and we want to understand the data, but actually a lot of it comes back to how we interact as individuals. So some of the initiatives that I've been party to, and I use the word deliberately over the last couple of months, have been, I did an awards ceremony to our team managers. Those team managers who had most consistently assessed and coached back brand standards in the previous year. It was a recognition event for sort of 2012, and we gave out prizes for that. And I guess I'd be interested from the floor to see if you guys do that sort of recognition event as well for your own coaching people, and sort of really was high profile with a lot of sort of razzmatazz and bells and whistles. Another initiative is meeting and greeting our new recruits, meeting them in a room, sitting down with a dozen people and sharing some stories. I've got a few stories which I always like to kind of use with the new recruits around. There's a great one about singing happy birthday to a customer and what that meant for the customer, but also what it meant for the brand in terms of some of the evolution off the back of that, and having an environment where that can be encouraged and sort of empowered. So I'll hopefully get to share some of those things either during the course of the next couple of days or maybe during this session. But for those that like data, I've also brought a few stats along about recruitment and how that plays through into the customer experience side of things as well, which I think some of you may be interested in, because somebody said earlier, I think it was Robin, that ESAT is CSAT, and I absolutely believe and get that if you've got engaged and empowered employees, people, then that's going to feed through into the customer experience. And I love the bit about crack earlier from Donal in terms of the idea of just having a good, positive conversation. At the end of the day, most of our people in contact centres and in the support functions, they're doing it for a lot of hours on shifts, etc. And actually, being able to do that with positivity can have a huge and subliminal psychological effect, both on the individual having that positive conversation, which I think is a cultural phenomenon in Ireland, having spent a few days here on a couple of occasions, and it really can make a huge impact on the receiving person as well. So a few points just to, I guess, refer to.
Great, thank you very much. And Gary?
Since I started work, as Dale said, it's always been in customer services. And for some reason, even when I got more and more senior, I always felt that I was the only subject matter expert in the company, that I was the customer service. That's me. I was Mr. Customer Service, which I always felt was a bit strange, and I'm sure you guys feel like that really as well, where actually it isn't. There's no mystery around customer services, right? I mean, we expect it when we are shopping and when we're at restaurants, but suddenly when you walk into the door of an office, it's your responsibility as a customer service person. And I always found that quite amusing, actually, that I was seen as somebody who knew the dark art of customer services and could keep everybody happy inside the organisation and out. So when, particularly at DHL, when a couple of years ago, our global chief executive stood up at a conference and said, we will become an insanely customer-centric organisation. He said, quote, every time we lose a parcel or something goes wrong, I want you to be sick to the stomach that that's gone wrong for that customer. So I was kind of like, wow, this is good. Now's my time. And over the next 2 years at DHL, really, that's exactly what happened. With lots of different programs, global training programs of 100,000 people, but closer to home in customer services, it was really about getting everybody at the front line, whether it's operations or in a call centre, to understand that they weren't worrying about brown boxes from A to B. What they're actually worrying about is wedding dresses. They're worrying about passports. They're worrying about 50th, 60th birthday presents. They're worrying about stuff that people really care about. We couple that with something called Straight to the Top, which Phil, who I work for, is the CEO. You're going to hear him talk about it over dinner, hopefully, which is, just as Dale said, anybody can go onto the DHL website, find my picture and Phil's picture, and send us an email that goes directly to our Blackberries about anything they want, complaints, compliments, anything. Once the organisation saw that actually the senior management were opening their doors and really cared for the people and for our customers, gradually that changed the mindset of employees, because they sit there in the call centre and they take 100 calls a day. Not many people phone up DHL to tell us how fantastic we are and thanks for getting the shipment there on time. It's normally people that have got problems, as you'd expect. In most call centres, it's the same. And for those guys to see what was happening at the top, right from our global chief executive to the countries, that actually we were really caring about our customers, it was a real game changer. I'd say in terms of, personally, what keeps employees motivated, I like to use the word or the phrase, a servant's heart. Now, I've got a servant's heart. I was born with it. I guarantee everybody in this room has got a servant's heart, and it's a very rare quality. And a servant's heart needs to be nurtured and looked after. It needs to be told whether it's doing the right thing or whether it's doing the wrong thing. No matter how important we get and how senior we get, we should never lose sight of the fact that we've got servants' hearts, and every single person who works with us and around us in the organisation, if they're customer-facing, should have a servant's heart as well. And I think, for me, that's what I always carry forward, really understanding what that kind of generous spirit and love of others, in terms of what attracts people to do customer services, what really makes that tick and what is really going to keep that motivated.
Fantastic, thank you. If I was to ask each of you, what would be, well, what we often do with our clients is set up some kind of magic moments so that people are really recognizing and celebrating success in real time. If I was to ask you, starting with Maria, what would you be your one magic moment in the organization? And if you were to speak on behalf of one of your frontline team, what do you think would be the best magic moment?
So at Spotify, we launched something called Random Acts of Kindness program.
Okay.
And what we kind of talked the advisors through the fact that we just wanted them to engage positively, have that positive conversation that we keep talking about today with customers. But they didn't have any budget, so they couldn't kind of just, they had some swag, so they had some, and
yeah.
they could. And so what we did is we asked them to create the hypothesis that, if I talk to X amount of customers and give them some acts of kindness, what do they think will happen as a result?
Right.
And what we found was that it took a little while to get off the ground. So we kind of got a few advisors kind of going for it, and we got a few advisors kind of starting to do it. They really got into it. And what they started to do is they started to look at the customers, what the customers were getting blocked in. So it's a music streaming service, right? So they were getting blocked in something technical or something music related. So they would solve the problem, and then they started using things like playlists. So they would create a little playlist for the customer, and then another advisor actually kind of got on the back of that and put a hidden message within their little playlist to say that they were really sorry for a customer. And then they started taking photos, and tweeting those photos. So a little kind of sorry poster or a we hope it's all right for you poster. And there were kind of magic moments that were going on, so many times. And then what I did was I spoiled it because I decided to put a metric around it.
Okay.
I decided to wrap it up in a process and put a little metric cherry on top. So I said, right, contact centre, you must give random acts of kindness to 25% of the customers that you interact with. And it no longer became a random acts of kindness programme because suddenly these advisors were pressured to actually engage with customers positively. And the authenticity and the sincerity sort of started to reduce. So my magic moment, I suppose, was realising that and trying to put back, we then kind of canned it and we sort of were able to prove the return on investment from it eventually, but we found a way to do it in a much more organic way. But the advisors just sort of coming in and kind of just being able to give those magic moments to customers, often through social channels, was really great because we saw quality go up naturally, whether they gave random acts of kindness or not. We saw the speed of what they were doing going up, so we saw productivity improving, and we also saw their energy levels and their performance levels improving as well.
Great. Same question to Mike.
Yeah, I guess there's, the storytelling, as I've mentioned on a few of the sessions today, is quite a big thing in First Direct. I could sit here for some time and talk about these. I'll try and give you a few examples. So we use something called free information in First Direct. So it's where the customer says that my daughter's getting married at the weekend. And we train our people and encourage them, because they don't need much encouragement. If that happens, to have a conversation about it and actually just recognise during the call, don't just give them the balance and say, is there anything else I can help you with, and get off. Have a conversation, say, I hope the weather's great at the weekend and it goes really well. Because there's two people going to benefit from that. The customer will appreciate it because it's genuine, and the agent will actually enjoy the conversation as well. We have done Surprise and Delight, sounds like a very similar initiative, which overlays that, so our people are empowered to send gifts and bottles of wine, champagne, boxes of chocolates, all that sort of thing. So those sort of things are almost endemic and systemic. Stories, there are many. I'll give you one which we have talked about a number of times in First Direct, which is when the Twin Towers was occurring. There was an English customer in the Twin Towers who chose to ring First Direct because he wanted to talk to a friendly voice at home during that whole event. So we had a customer literally in the Twin Towers on the phone for 2 hours to First Direct during that event, which is an interesting phenomenon almost in its own right. But I guess, and we see letters all the time. I saw one 2 weeks ago from a customer who'd lost her husband, having suffered from Alzheimer's, and the way she wrote and described what support we'd given to her husband in terms of being a touch point, who was prepared where our people were prepared not just to still sort of transact, but have a warm, personable conversation. And he would share with us where his daughter was based up in Yorkshire, etc. So those sort of things flow through our business very regularly, and we share them because it's all about storytelling. My personal favourite is a story about a birthday celebration, which I mentioned earlier, so I'll tell it very briefly now if I can. I was told a story, or it started just before I joined First Direct. It was in a restaurant in York. My sister-in-law was celebrating her birthday, and she said, you're going to work First Direct? That's great, because I've banked with First Direct for a couple of years now. And even last week, they were brilliant. On Thursday night, I was out with the girls, celebrating my birthday, and I put my jeans in the wash with my debit card in the pocket and literally laundered the thing. So I needed a new one. And I phoned in the next day to say to the person, I need a new debit card. And the first thing the rep said was, that's not a great thing to happen on your birthday. And I had a conversation about Mandy's birthday and sort of what she'd done, and a real person-to-person conversation. So it's a nice story in that event happened, and she told 15 people around a dinner table in York. When I first went to First Direct, then a week later, my secretary, Jan Killaby, said, I told her the story, and she said, I'm responsible for that. And I said, well, you're a secretary, so there's got to be more to it. You weren't on the phones last week talking to Mandy. She said, no, 8 years ago, what happened was I was on the phone to a customer, and I said at the end of a call where at the identification and verification stage, she'd asked the customer what his date of birth was, and he's confirmed it was today's date, and she said, oh, that's great, happy birthday. And it was a pure chance event. So throughout the conversation, she touched on it a couple of times. It was this customer's birthday, and at the end she said, is there anything else I can help you with today? Now, imagine your own call centres. I don't know if this would work for you or not, but the customer said, yeah, you can sing happy birthday to me. So Jan stood up with a headset on, with all of her team kind of on their headsets, and sang happy birthday to the customer. And two things, again, I would guarantee happened there. One is that customer, he did laugh at the end of the call, said thanks very much, and probably went off quite happy, and maybe told a few more people about a great experience I had with First Direct. Jan's team gave her a round of applause, so which is a cultural phenomenon, I guess, so you couldn't deploy that in every call centre. But Jan didn't kind of stop there. She decided that it shouldn't be a chance event to ask somebody the birthday, that whenever somebody calls into First Direct, if it's on the birthday, there should be a system-generated flash-up screen that says, customer's birthday, you are free, if you wish, if it's appropriate to do so, to have a chat with them. We don't say to anybody they've got to sing happy birthday or do anything like that, but we do give a piece of free information to our people that encourages them to have a person-to-person conversation. A bit like the fact that you now know I'm a Newcastle fan and a football coach with a 17-month-old daughter, because knowing something about people does actually help you interact with them. And our people use that, and in our surveys, every week, customers write back to say how fantastic we are, and actually, even when I rang in on my birthday, you noticed that and had a conversation with me. So there's something about that one story that kind of joins up, not just the culture that allowed it to happen in the first place, but actually the way that was now embedded within the almost legend or the service proposition to actually make sure it happens on future occasions as well. So that's my single favourite story, but actually storytelling is huge in our business. We do storytelling a lot, and we tell stories about the aspirational standard we want people to move to, and it's far more powerful than any KPI, metric, performance management link, value statement or mission statement that I've ever come across.
Great. And Gary?
So we're talking about magic moments. Probably my magic moments are different from the advisors, I would imagine. But we have to create them, firstly. We have to find them. And I'm very keen on really tapping into a DHL. There's 450 advisors in the UK, for example, 6,000 advisors globally. Each one of those are taking 100 calls a day. There's got to be some real pearls in there, some real gems that the management should know about, customer feedback-wise, and also really good acts of service that our teams and our people have given. So how do we find them out? That's the question. And one of the things that enables us to have these magic moments lots of times every single day and make a big fuss of our people is very simple. At the bottom of every email that's sent out, it just says, how am I doing, ? And it's got the email address of that advisor's manager or supervisor. Very, very simple. And I would encourage everybody to do it because whenever an email's sent out, it makes sure that the advisor knows it's on the bottom. They can't delete it. So they think twice and really constructing it in the proper way and giving it a good level of service. But what we get back is a massive amount of feedback. Some of it's developmental and can be used in the advisor's coaching session that month. A lot of it is motivational, and it goes directly to the manager's inbox. And literally, there's probably 10 or 15 parties going on in the call centre every day where the manager's able to make a public fuss of the advisor. Of course, there's a lot of people who do this kind of work that don't want to knowingly be made a fuss of. So we have to consider how they'd get motivated as well. From the employee's point of view or the advisor's point of view, I don't think it would be anything that fancy, really. If I ask them, you know, what are the time of the week that you enjoy the most, they'd probably say Bingo Wednesday, when we put bingo numbers on the wallboard, and they just scroll around and they tick them off a sheet. They can do it in between calls. But they absolutely love it. I mean, it's the highlight of the week. Big prizes like a bottle of wine. Ooh. But they absolutely love it. They look forward to it. So we must never forget there's big stuff and, you know, the big motivational stuff which we can celebrate with our people. But in terms of what their magic moments are during the week, which can be very humdrum, unless there's some big excitement going on. It's the small things like wallboard bingo, which they absolutely adore.
Brilliant. So it's getting those small things right.
Absolutely right, yeah.
Fantastic. Before I dominate all of your time, does anybody have any questions? I've got more. Very quiet group out there. No? Okay. Over back to me.
Sorry.
Very good.
Is there a way of, we were talking recently about how to make the customer care centre an integral part of the entire organisation. And I get what you're saying completely. Is there a way of bringing in other departments into this wonderful euphoria that you've got planned?
I'll answer that for a second. We have just done a program called Walk in My Shoes, where everybody of a certain management grade and above, and we're not talking senior managers, supervisory level and above, have, from all departments, have spent a day in every department. So a call centre supervisor, let's say, will spend a day in customer accounting, will spend a day with a courier, will spend a day in head office, hosted. And it's a lot of work because, for example, in the call centre, it means we may have, over the last 6 months, 40 or 50 or 60 visits. But the people in the teams really enjoy welcoming people and showing off. Doesn't matter what the team is, they really like it. And what we've done is given a mechanism for anybody who is in another department to have a look at it with fresh eyes and make a note of anything that they liked or they didn't like particularly. That's then brought into the board meeting and shared so that we can really understand how each function is running from the eyes of somebody else who doesn't normally work in there. But it really does, it kind of spreads the spirit across the business. It has done in a really good way.
Did you also want to pick that up?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of things running with Aurora at the moment. The first is around sort of root cause resolution. So we actually have sort of virtual teams within the contact centre who have some responsibility to convey the problem, the root of the customer's problem, and actually work with the brand, you know, with a sort of counter team in the brand to see what they can do to fix the problem. So we have kind of what we call sort of intensive hothouse sessions where we let the agents go off and sort of try and solve the problem directly with the brands. That's at quite a tactical level. At Spotify, we had a great, actually, a really good kind of reward for the advisors where we would have one advisor would be able to go and work in any office in the world in Spotify for a week, and we'd put them up. So it's a real, you know, sort of, there was some, you know, measures behind it, but we got two things out of it. We got a really engaged kind of workforce constantly because they got the opportunity to go and, you know, choose the office they wanted to work in, be it New York or Australia or wherever. And also they got to just work alongside other teams for a week doing their work. So those teams got to see in a very organic way what that advisor was doing and how they were working and how they were interacting with customers, and some great kind of, you know, serendipitous conversations and sort of initiatives came out of that.
And I suppose from my perspective, I touched on it earlier, most of our departments or teams in First Direct, whether it be marketing, IT, digital, there's a fair proportion of the people in those business areas who actually came from the call centre operation. So the ethos, if you like, that is First Direct in terms of the rapport, the talking to customers and the values that go along with are absolutely embedded in the other parts of the business. And there's almost a common galvanizing sort of understanding around what it is that drives the business. And I think everybody in First Direct probably understands that the reason for being, if you like, the USP is very much about the delivery of that customer service, of that. It's a very leveling playing field, or levels the playing field very well when you realise that a lot of the other drivers are relegated to second place in terms of the financials, the sales volumes. Lots of other metrics are important to the business, clearly, but we've put customer service on such a pinnacle for so long that it is absolutely embedded in the business. So I guess we don't have to take other areas to that place. They're already there. And the other important factor, which I mentioned at the round table earlier, is that we have a very flat hierarchy. We all sit in the operation. The CEO sits in amongst the call center and the customer-facing reps. And we all wear name badges. Nobody's got a job title in the name badge. It just says First Direct in your name. There are no reserved car parking spaces. There is no obvious hierarchy. And when you're in a business or a building where there's 1,500 to 2,000 people who are paid to talk for a living, if they're not happy about something, they kind of let you know about it. And I've said it a couple of times today that it's so much faster than any Six Sigma program will ever be. When you get 5 or 6 people coming to tell you they're not happy about something and what you're going to do about it, because there's respect there, but they just believe that you can be approached and they come and talk to you, and that's great. So I guess bringing those other departments in, there tend to be at least most a minute's walk away, perhaps a 10-second walk away, even to the CEO, and the feedback flows.
Good, thank you. Any other questions?
Hi there, Mike. Sort of linked to the point you're just making there around financials might come second to customer service and so on. Just really asking the panel, what advice or what would you say, I guess, to those doubters out there that are hung up on average handling time versus your point around telling stories and getting the value from that?
The average handling time one's an interesting one. Zappos, and I've seen them present, probably one of the closest businesses culturally to First Direct that I've seen in terms of their ethos, even the look, kind of. I'm smartly dressed, and this is what I wear for work, sort of jeans and a shirt. But a lot of our guys, it looks a bit like the Zappos thing quite a lot of the time, with weird stuff going on and kind of a bit bright and colourful, but a lot of personality in there. So it's interesting. We do have the longer conversations because the storytelling allows it. We don't just allow it. We set that as our aspirational standard, and I'll use that term over and over again because it's simple. I could probably use different words and complicate it, but actually saying, by telling stories, you don't just allow it, but you say, that's what we want. So when people get that complaint, whether something's happened for the customer, the fact that you've told those stories makes the person think, I am now empowered and encouraged to have that 10, 15, 20-minute conversation, or even in 2 hours, if that's what it needs to solve that customer. We've had people, and we've told the story, about the rep who has a customer on the train from London to Leeds, who the customer's left the purse at home, so the rep goes to the cash machine in First Direct, takes out £100 and takes the money round to Leeds train station to hand it to the customer, and then we sort out the accounting and the debiting of it later. But we tell those stories deliberately because it's a bit like the Zappos one. We're not too concerned about the average handling time, we're far more concerned about the customer. But that empowers all sorts of other agents, customer-facing representatives, to go out and do something similarly impressive. And I guess that in business sense, average handling time, we all know the metrics. If it goes up by 10 seconds, you might need another 100 people on seats. But actually, if you retain that customer and 100,000 other customers for life, and cross-sell and sort of really get a lot of sort of products, value-adding products, they're probably the ones that will pay for those 100 reps 10 times over. So it's almost try to avoid the short-term metric fixation around average handling time or SLA and focus on serving the customers well and keeping them.
Anybody else want to respond?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the culture of where the centre is and the customers that it's servicing, and it also depends on the product or the service. I think you have to. I try not to get hung up on AHT. I try not to. It's important, clearly. Otherwise, we're going to have hundreds more bums on seats, and none of us want that particularly. But if you've got 210 seconds, you can do a lot with that as an advisor if you're taught how to do a lot with it. So regardless of how budgets are stretched, for example, our chief executives, I guarantee the whole AHT thing is a dark art to them. So they would never say, and if they are, you're very unlucky, I have to say, they would never say, Gary, bring your AHT down and get 5 people out of the call centre. Because it wouldn't even cross his mind. So AHT is kind of our own measure, really, which we work on. And I'd say, it doesn't have to go up for us to give a better quality of service within the time that we've got. It takes coaching, and it takes giving our advisors the right skills on how to build rapport as quickly as they can. But I'll go back to what I said at the start. Really, really important is, does your product or service require that kind of service? Is it more transactional? Do your customers just want fast, efficient answers? And are they going to be happy with that? And I think the more in a centre where there's a frontline and a backline environment, where there's a trade-off, and the customer is likely not to get the answer on the first call, efficiency and effectiveness for me in that 210 seconds, let's say, is more important sometimes than rapport building, because the customer will just tell you, get my answer, and that's it. So it just depends on the product and the service that you're offering. So don't get hung up on it, is what I'd say.
You okay?
Yeah, I would agree, yeah.
Okay, great. Does anybody have any last questions? Because I think we are coming to an end of time, and I know people are getting tired. Any last questions? No. Can I just ask one more question, and then we can finish on this? How much do you believe that brand, the external brand that you deliver to your customer, influences internally as an engagement tool for your people? We start with Gary and work back.
It's massive. It's massive. And, I've got a couple of real-life examples. When I was at EasyJet, EasyJet at that time went through some difficult patches, but, externally and internally. But really, the employees really felt like they were pioneers of the low-cost industry. And it was really funny to see how they acted in that environment. Okay? Yeah. They truly were orange. Oh, in every, well, it was Bedfordshire, so in every sense, to be honest. Yeah. I'm from Bedfordshire, so I can say that. Orange externally, orange internally. They really, really lived and breathed it. That was because it was on the TV, because Stelios was always in the media for being a pioneer and at the leading edge. And at DHL, really, I've had both examples of where there really hasn't been a big love of the brand from the employees. Over the last 2 years, since we've been sponsoring, we've put global TV adverts out. Customers are telling us that they want to go to events that we do. It feeds the passion in the employees more than you can ever imagine. So if it's a respected brand, in terms of a big publicly respected brand, I think it makes our jobs a lot easier.
Sure. And I guess it's the use of internal comms to ensure that that gets translated back into the business.
Yeah.
Great.
I guess from having had just over 10 years of First Direct, there's a huge pride associated with being part of First Direct. My intention when I first moved across from HSBC sort of 10 and a half years ago was to stay there for a maximum of 2 years. I was going to move on and sort of progress through and do other things, and I guess there was the ability to work in a business where it was so highly regarded, but actually we had so much autonomy and ability to change things and move things forward was quite a compelling reason to stay. And I think a lot of people in First Direct feel the same in terms of there's some, again, good examples where 55% of the people who come to work in First Direct come through our Recommend a Friend scheme. So it's actually more than half of the employees that join us when we recruit. It's because somebody else has said it's a great place to work. So again, that external brand perception really does come to the fore when we're recruiting. People are very passionate about the position that we hold in terms of satisfaction within the various sort of externally assessed things like which surveys and I guess some of the awards that we've won over the years as well. It's almost the trophy cabinet is passionately sort of guarded, but also celebrated. So that is it's got a huge playback. I sometimes call it the ping pong effect as well, because the biggest and most important external perception of the First Direct brand is our individual customers. So actually, it's on that individual conversation where a customer rings in, and because they're used to speaking to a friendly person who's going to act efficiently, but actually do it with a bit of personality, you can tell when the customers first come on, typically, they come in quite positive about talking to us. But then because that energized state, our agents are able to bounce back on that, and it almost creates this kind of dynamic movement of energy. And it's quite a great thing to listen to. If you sit down for a few hours in First Direct and observe calls, you kind of just witness this exchange of people having great conversations, a bit like the crack that was referred to earlier. So I guess that's the most important internalization of that brand perception. It's through the individual customer interactions.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. At Spotify, we was, you know, it was a really strong brand. It was about kind of providing an alternative to piracy. There was a real mission there, and it was really important to allow the call center agents, the contact center guys, to express that in some way. So we employed people that were, you know, interested in technology, interested in music, often in bands. So we used to, you know, allow them to play live music in the office. And, you know, various bands, good and bad, kind of were created out of that. And just allowing some of what the brand is trying to achieve in a simple way, allowing that to live and breathe in the office can be quite powerful. In I think, a space like technology or in fashion, it's really easy to do. So in Aurora, we've got kind of, you know, clothes and shoes, you know, everywhere. So you know, it's really easy for the advisors to kind of live and feel what those brands are trying to achieve and what they're trying to deliver. I think it's critical.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. I can see some movement over here. So I'll conclude. So I just wanted to thank the panelists. So thank you very much.